Welcome to Team Futurism. Today I'm interviewing Christopher Gerlacher, a writer and journalist who covers politics and prediction markets. And he's also the political trading analyst at Prediction News. Chris, thanks for coming on the show.
Oh, thanks so much for having me.
So there's a lot of things that I want to cover today. I want to cover some trending topics. I want to cover some backstory of prediction markets. There's a lot in there. We've somehow on this channel never talked about this, as I was just telling you, which is kind of interesting. So It's a fun topic. Let me just ask to begin with, what's a little bit about your backstory and how did you get into the prediction market game?
Accidentally. So I was a freelance writer straight out of college. I got my business degree. I didn't like the jobs that were on offer at the tables. No one could really tell me what they did. It was a lot of answering emails and projects and meetings, but I wanted something a little more concrete where I knew what I was really doing in an impactful way from day to day. So I started out with some odd jobs, and I've done resume writing and video captioning and a couple of blogging gigs. But right when lockdown started in 2020, there was a guy starting a series of sports betting affiliate sites. He wanted to cover the sports betting industry. And this is right when a lot of states are coming online with sports betting. I live in Colorado, and I got this writing job and this journalism job the month before it all went live. So that took me to covering the rest of the gaming industry, mostly on sports. And near the end of that first year, I meet Alex Kane, who founded Sportrade, first company to offer sports contracts in the United States, but he did it under state sports betting law. And he's the one who introduced me to Kalshi's CEO. And I interviewed Alex and Kalshi's CEO, Tarek Mansauer, a few times. And that was my early interest in prediction markets. That's how I began writing about them as the industry. In 2022, I was writing about predicted and using their midterm odds to write about legal election trading back when they had those lower limits. And we can talk about that a little bit as well. And after I got laid off in 2024, somebody was starting a prediction market news site. So I hopped over there, and the rest is history.
Tell me a little bit about how big the world of prediction markets is and how new is it?
Let me start with age. It's much older than a lot of people probably think if they're just coming to prediction markets now. 2024 and the election was the really big standout moment. That was the big breakout when Kalshi wins its political election contract lawsuit, and they can offer these legal contracts at scale. And of course, Polymarket also benefits from that enormous exposure as well. So you've got those two really big players recently. But we can go back to the 90s and talk about some of the academic platforms. So the Iowa electronic markets, founded in 1988, they got a CFTC no action letter in 1992 that says, hey, we are going to leave you alone. We're going to let you offer these contracts as long as you keep them small. This has been a very long-standing interest in academia. We can go all the way back to Friedrich Hayek in the 40s if you want to. But the gist of prediction markets and why academics are so interested in them is their ability to harness the wisdom of crowds and cancel out any one lunatic, really. Figure out what the most reasonable picture of the world is. And there are decades of research behind this. Robin Hanson's done a ton of research into this throughout the 1990s as well. But you really don't have the user-friendly platforms until 2014 when you have Predicted initially launched. That's another academic platform, but it comes with a prettier interface. It's easier to use. It looks a lot more like the more modern trading and betting platforms. And then you get Kalshi launching in the 2020s, and you get that really commercial level prediction market platform where you can trade on almost anything with a couple of limitations based on federal law. But that's the gist of it. It began academic and has become this commercial juggernaut, not just in traditional finance, but also in crypto. I mean, you've got companies like Limitless and Melee Markets, PNP Exchange, lots of crypto companies experimenting with different ways to create markets, resolve markets, and really build this space.
Okay, so I do remember this from when I was in college. I had a psychology class where we talked about the wisdom of crowds, and I remember that there was some study done where like a county fair or something like this, and people were trying to guess the weight of a cow.
Yeah.
I think this is actually a fairly common thing that happens at counties, but this was studied in like a psychological context. And people are just like, right. When you get like enough people to bet on something as dumb as like, what's the weight of this cow? Somehow, like amazingly, people kind of low key get that right, like weirdly often. Talk to me a little bit about that, because I know that you're interested in the wisdom of crowd side of this.
Yeah, there's actually a great book called The Wisdom of Crowds by James Surowiecki, published I think in 2006, mid 2000s. And a lot of people in this space throw around the phrase wisdom of crowds, wise crowds. But wise crowds have conditions. You can get a bunch of people together if they all think the same thing, you have groupthink, and that you don't want that. I mean, I spent my entire business degree learning about how to avoid it, right? So for wise crowds, there are 4 rules. You need diversity of opinion. It can't be all the same opinion, just talking to each other. You need independence of thought. So each trader needs to bring their own knowledge and their own private information to the exchange and trade based on that. And basically you want error cancellation. So if you have a lunatic on one side of a market, you basically want another lunatic on the other side to kind of cancel each other out. And when this happens at scale, you get these very, very good predictions. You want a decentralized platform, not necessarily in the crypto sense. You just want everyone drawing on their local knowledge, and you don't want a number just handed down from on high, right? And then finally, you want an aggregation mechanism. You need a way to bring all of these guesses together. So with the weight of the cow, you can have somebody tally up everybody's guesses and see what the average is. Prediction markets are a natural aggregation tool. They already tick that box. So they really just have to make sure they have enough people and a diverse enough crowd that they can create meaningful forecasts.
To me, the most bizarre thing is that this works for politics, because you would think that people would just come in with their biases and just like bet on their biases, even if
Some
they
people
don't
do.
intend to. But you're saying that like that cancels itself out, which it must, because I mean, like the betting markets do. I mean, they're not like always accurate, obviously. It's just look this up and they
Right.
get it wrong for quite often. But like it's bizarrely accurate. And my question about this, which I'm genuinely curious about, is it seems like with the prediction market space as it currently exists, it is kind of like a young man phenomenon. It seems to mostly be young men who do this. And so it's kind of not shocking that like Donald Trump would be the favorite in a prediction market. And I was one of those people, and like a lot of people were like, oh, of course the prediction market said Donald Trump is going to win, like duh, because like it's all young men. Is that wrong?
Yes. And Kalshi put out some data right before the election in the weeks before mid-October. And even though the majority of their users are men, I think in that tweet in October 2024, 10% of their users were women, and about 40% of their trades on Donald Trump were by women. So there were still people.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so there were still people who were split between Harris and Trump, and Harris actually had fewer female trades or less volume from female traders than Donald Trump did. So people still want to be right. And this is another related concept about skin in the game. If you are, if you suffer the consequences of being wrong instead of having some portfolio manager or somebody else do it, if you're the one who loses the money, you want to be right. And that's something that also at scale can play out on prediction markets, although you're going to see a big difference in casual users who are just going to take whatever price is on offer versus the sharper traders who, they're placing limit orders. They're trying to set their own prices. They have a specific number they want to get their contracts at. And there's some nuance within prediction market traders, but no, just because it's majority male doesn't necessarily mean that the male favored candidate is going to be the favorite by itself. There were women who saw Trump's momentum, his ability to withstand virtually any scandal, and it was only a 60-40 split in the weeks leading up to the election. It got further on election night, but a 60-40 split in Trump's favor in 2024, that passed the gut check to me. So I think there's still some good predictive value there, even though it is, high risk, high reward, very testosterone fueled in some cases.
Do academics still take value out of prediction markets as they currently exist out in the wild? Like, are there as the results come in, like, are academics someplace in a lab being like, oh, this is interesting, like documenting all of it, and is it useful for like human knowledge?
Oh, they love this stuff. I mean, Predicted was founded in 2014, and that was an academic project. That's out of the, I think, Wellington University in New
Okay.
Zealand. And they're using the data themselves to study how well not only that markets predict, but also how quickly they react. And if you watch any of the Kalshi or poly market debate markets as we get into midterm season, and once the presidential election really starts next year in 27, not 26, you really can see these markets react in real time. So you can really see which events are real events and which are kind of non-events or might be getting spun out of proportion. So there's still some academic value in these. One of the big differences across markets, though, is going to be how much uncertainty is around different events. So markets are really good at aggregating publicly available information that's available to traders, even if it's only to a few sharp bettors, right? And the challenge there is, take the mentioned markets, for example. What is Trump going to say in his next speech? You can look at previous transcripts. You can get an idea of what he could say based on the news that's happening right now, topics he's hit in previous speeches. But he's reliably strange and unpredictable as a speaker. So he can go off on different tangents. And, that can, even if you arrive at a number, it may not be a great representation over many, many trials over how likely he really is to say fat shot or Ozempic in a speech, right? You got to try that a couple of times to see, whether it's really resolving at 20% every time or whether the market is adjusting over time. Or, what if Brian Armstrong keeps dropping mention market terms in future earnings calls? Are the prices going to adjust to those? I think they probably will. I think if he kept doing that, it would become less valuable to buy in his mention markets. But there's some nuance there as well. If you contrast mention markets with something like the presidential election, where there's a lot of different local knowledge you want to aggregate and bring in there, and everybody's really trying to be independent, hopefully, and bringing their own opinions into it and not hurting too much. There's a big difference between a big event like that and something like the mentioned markets, which can be much more volatile and much more poorly priced, even in a rich market.
So in my mind, and this might be a dumb question, forgive me, I'm going to have a couple of them. But in my mind, there are like three buckets to this. There's politics, there is sports, and then there's like the goofy shit, like Taylor Swift getting married shit, or mention markets, right? Are there formal categories to this, and do people stick to certain categories and like I only bet on like politics, or is there like wide crossover? Tell me like how like you see it like this.
It's a pretty good representation of the buckets, actually.
Okay.
Although the culture markets do, I might add them as a fourth if I'm getting really persnickety. But I mean, if you look at the entertainment industry and the ecosystem around whatever celebrities do, I mean, there's already an enormous amount of financial consequences for, Taylor Swift getting married or celebrity gossip and things like that. And I've spoken to a couple of female influencers in the space who want to use that as an onboarding tool to get more women into prediction markets. And there is some crossover. I was at an event where the former head of Kalshi operations was speaking, and this was at Manifest this summer. And they were talking about, using sports as a way to get new customers in the door and then try and get them to get into the political markets, get into some of the culture markets, go bet the weather if you're interested in it. So there's definitely some crossover there. These more popular markets are good customer acquisition tools. We'll see whether they get to keep sports long term. That's being fought out in the courts right now, and that'll take several years probably to resolve. So in the meantime, I think they've got a strong customer acquisition tool in some of those markets.
What are some of your favorite goofy prediction that you have seen or that you maybe personally bet on?
I won $57 because Trump said fat shot or Ozempic in September. Okay. Proud of that one. I like the mention markets a lot. During the debate between it was the first New York City mayoral debate, And I picked, I think I won big on, I want to say Bill Ackman. I think he came up, but he was priced very, very low. I can pull it up real quick if you wanted me to, but I like the mention markets for that reason. You can get some long shot wins because they're not impossible to price. You can always put a number on it, but those unlikely categories, those, your 16 or 20% chances, those can probably hit in a more uncertain market like a mention market. So I'm a big fan of those, and I like to play around in those.
Okay, one more dumb question about this. So, where do those bets originate? Like, who's comes up with like, oh, this word is going to be the mention that we're going to bet on?
Oh, those strikes come from the companies.
Oh, the companies do. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, so the companies are building these markets, at least on the large platforms. So Kalshi and Polymarket are releasing their own. They're accepting customer feedback about which strikes to offer, which words to offer, but they're the ones who are creating those. There are some platforms that are still trying to experiment with user-generated markets. So Manifold, for example, it's a free-to-play, play money prediction market site, and anyone can create their own market with their own resolution rules. And they used to have a kind of sweepstakes model where they had a premium currency where the company would select the best worded and most popular markets to be eligible to trade a real money currency equivalent in. They had to abandon it, I think last fall, but that's also an ongoing experiment within the industry, is trying to build these new markets and these new options at scale, not just by the company, but also finding a way to get users to be able to do it on either niche events or just really popular, interesting ones.
So it is interesting that culturally, even if you don't pay attention to this at all, prediction markets are almost being like shoved in our faces now because a lot of online platforms are just so into them, perhaps as like an easy way to like get monetization. So for example, Google is going to integrate prediction markets into its finance AI tools. Truth Social, I believe, has already done this. An article about that. And also the goofiest one that I've seen is MoviePass. Do you remember that company that like went out of business? Like it was a cool idea, but it was super mismanaged, something like this. There's like a documentary about it, and then like it went under. So it got resurrected, and it's still, I think, going to do like its main service, but then it also is building in prediction markets into it too. And it's just kind of like, I almost, again, I want to roll my eyes and be like, okay, you're just finding an easy path for monetization because like your main business model probably isn't that great, especially with like the movie industry low key in turmoil for a lot of reasons. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
I think there are a couple things happening. I brought up Manifold and the sweepstakes model earlier. Sweepstakes used to be how you got around state gambling laws. And the gambling industry has been cracking down on this very, very hard. And this year especially, but recent years as well, that's been an ongoing struggle. So if you offer a free currency and a premium currency you pay for that you can redeem for cash, that's the sweepstakes model. So you have the option to play the game for free, but if you want to bet or if you want to buy in, you're able to do that. And that was just enough to skirt around state gaming laws. And so that's on the way out. And so those companies have to, they're going to move to crypto or find another way to reach large markets and get into gaming. Sports books like DraftKings partnering with Yardbird, or not Yardbird, Railbird. DraftKings is licensed by the states in almost just under 40 states, but every state has their own license fee, their own tax rate, some of their own regulations. It's a really cumbersome process to launch a regulated sports book in the United States. But if you're a prediction market, if you're regulated by the CFTC, if you're a federally regulated exchange, you've got 50 state access, one corporate tax rate, one regulator, one set of rules. And so you're seeing the gaming industry trying to elbow their way into prediction markets as well. So I think that's one of the reasons you're seeing it explode. There's genuine enthusiasm among the more technocratic people who are excited about the ability to combat misinformation, poke holes in punditry with prediction markets, have people put money where their mouth is. But there are a lot of people on here who are just here to gamble. And there are a lot of companies who want that traffic and want that revenue. So there are just a lot of things coming together to really push prediction markets.
Is this mostly in the US or I mean, I know that some of these services aren't even available in the US necessarily, but like how big is this globally?
Globally, it's big. Polymarket's been outside the United States since 2022.
And it's like not in the US at all. Is that
There, if you have a VPN, you can go use it. And Polymarket is preparing a return to the United States. Polymarket got fined in January 2022 for being an unlicensed derivatives exchange by the CFTC. So part of that settlement was you pay the fine and you get out of the United States. You can operate elsewhere. That's the other country's problem, but you're out of here until you get a license. The Trump administration has, part of their agenda has been this big embrace of crypto. And that has been of enormous benefit to Polymarket. So they've had their investigations against them drop this summer, and really any day or any week now, they're going to launch Polymarket in the United States and get into the sports contracts with everybody else. So no, it is significant globally as well.
I want to talk about some of the harms, but before I do, I want to make sure we don't miss AI. Let's talk about AI. Google is transparently going to like make prediction markets part of their finance AI tools. I don't know the details of this. I've barely looked into it, but it seems just obvious that AI is going to impact this world. There was an article in Prediction News that a quarter of Polymarket is already fake, and I bet that I didn't read that article in full, but I bet that like AI might have something to do with that. What is AI going to disrupt this industry? Could it kill it? Is it going to be a boon for it? What are the impacts going to look like in your mind?
AI is probably going to be very good for this industry. You've already got AI trading bots who are trying to find edges and trade automatically and manage small portfolios. And those are
With
only
like
going to
people
become
behind them. Like, do people
right.
control them like as agents? Is that how that works?
Yes. Yeah, people still have to control them as agents, at least in the regulated markets. If you go over to some of the crypto sites, you're seeing experiments with fully autonomous AI, and that is going to become more of an issue that the CFTC is going to have to manage. I think they could by the end of this presidential term. And it's not like the existential AI questions. It's like if an AI trader makes a series of trades with the goal of just getting a contract to a certain price. They're trying to set a price. Can the CFTC open that up and say, how did you arrive at this decision to set this price? Because with a regular firm, you can take a New York trading firm to court and say, hey, you were trading to get this contract from 50 to 70 just because you think the price should be 70. Prove to us that this is consistent with your pricing model. And a real firm can say, yeah, we think it's the real price. And that's not market manipulation in that case. That's legal. You have to be able to do that with an AI trader if you're going to allow an autonomous agent into the regulated space. So that's just one example of something that the CFTC is going to have to watch very closely, because it's going to be very, very slow and it's not going to work very well. And then all of a sudden it's going to click, the agent will work, and it's going to be an issue that the CFTC will have to address. We're also going to see AI generated markets. There are already companies trying to do AI generated markets like PNP Exchange. You go through your X feed, you see a topic you're really interested in, you can generate a market just right there in the X comment section.
Okay, so
help
me understand this a little bit, because I did pull up this article from Prediction News. It's called "Washed Out: Study Estimates a quarter of Polymarket volume is fake."
Yes.
Tell me what wash trading is exactly. It's kind of sort of here, but skimming it, recording this, it's hard to comprehend. So maybe
get you a real-time reaction to wash trading.
So
wash trading is just sending the same contract back and forth between yourself over and over again. You're just one trader or a group of traders, and you're just buying and selling the same contracts. And what that does, you're not making money on it, but you are generating trade volume, because you put $1 in. It's based on the notional value of what the contracts could be worth if they paid out. And so if there's an airdrop coming on, say, Polymarket, you can get rewarded based on how much trade volume you generate, even if you don't put enough actual money in. So you see a lot of people, and this is a big issue in crypto for reasons I'll get into in a minute. But you saw in Polymarket these really rapid trades at very, very low, almost zero prices. So contracts that are 1 cent or less. And it's a lot of people who are going to get a lot of trade volume, generate a lot of it, have a lot of it attributed to them. And when Polymarket airdrops their token, it's going to be based on trade volume, and that's going to be a huge reward for those traders. The watch trading on Polymarket picked up after they announced intentions to do an airdrop. So that's a big part of it. The reason it's an issue in crypto, regulated platforms like Kalshi have trading fees. It's how the exchange survives. Robinhood has brokerage fees. That's how they're incentivized to list Kalshi's contracts. It doesn't cost anything to do a transaction on Polymarket because it's on the blockchain, because it's on crypto, because Polymarket in its crypto form does not have trading fees. Watch trading can actually be profitable. It doesn't cost you anything. It's a viable trading strategy. So when it comes to the United States and it introduces fees on its US platform, that's going to take a big chunk of that watch trading out as well. So it's an issue. You want accurate trade volume so you know whether price changes are driven by the market and not by a couple of whales. But it's going to be, frankly, a bigger challenge for Polymarket and any large crypto trading platform than it will be for a fiat currency platform.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so the elephant in the room in this conversation, to me anyway, is the potential harms to society that this all causes, and in particular, young men. I am not going to spell this out, though. I'm going to have Scott Galloway spell this out because I've heard him do multiple rants about the harms that this does to society. I think in general, he's not a fan. I'm not sure exactly what he wants to do to regulate it. I don't recall offhand, but I'm going to play a clip of Scott Galloway, and it's a couple minutes. And then I would get your reaction to it on the other side.
I just think it's out of control. And then the problem is I don't think you can evangelize a 22-year-old. I think they get to make decisions, including stupid decisions. But I think they need to be educated about the risks they're taking. So gambling has the highest suicide rate of all addictions because most people, Ed, if you developed a meth addiction, we'd figure it out and we would try and move in. You could get on your phone and get addicted to gambling and lose everything. Guy spends his kid's college fund, mortgages his house. No one has any idea, and he decides, okay, I'm in too deep. Highest addiction rate. Yet there's no dedicated federal budget for gambling addiction treatment or research. By comparison, the National Institute for Drug Abuse allocated $1.6 billion for drug addiction research, and the CDC allocates about $310 million to tobacco control. And because there's so much money in this, it runs unregulated. Personal bankruptcy filings increased by 28% in states where sports betting gets legalized. So basically, bankruptcies surge by almost a third the moment you legalize gambling. It also disproportionately affects young men and low-income people. Approximately 15% of U.S. adults age 18 to 34 have problematic gambling behaviors compared to only 2% of people age 55 plus. 20% of male gamblers have a gambling problem compared to just 8% of the female gamblers. Again, see above. Immature prefrontal cortex. Households with lower savings balances spend 32% more on gambling as a share of their income than high savings households looking for a way out. But it's increasingly difficult to regulate this because we no longer call it gambling. It's been rebranded as a prediction market. And these are casinos. They're more interesting. They might feel more substantive to bet on the outcome of the mayoral race. But be clear, folks, this is gambling. According to Kalshi, prediction markets are not gambling, but a form of financial market exchange. Yeah, fuck you. We're not that stupid. This is gambling. Whether you're gambling on the Jets or Mamdani, it's gambling. So the most profitable companies in the world all do the same thing. They tap into an instinctual flaw and they start monetizing this flaw despite the impact it has on consumers, whether it's tobacco companies getting people addicted to tobacco and then spending a ton of money to try and argue that nicotine wasn't addictive. And then when our mothers and our sisters continue to die, we finally figured this shit out. The same thing is happening here. So we have Trump, the crime family Trump, and we have the mendacious fucks at Robinhood deploying at scale using technology a drug that is highly addictive. So I'm horrified by this shit.
Okay, so uh kind of low energy Scott Galloway. He's kind of like just like resting on his hand, just kind of like talk. I like it when he gets a little bit more animated. You know, with Kara Swisher, he will just like start like screaming into the mic, and it's way more fun. But he makes good points. You know, even low energy Scott Galloway here is making good points. So you're here to stand up for the mendacious fucks, I believe, right? So
was that my job?
Give me your. I'm not too sure. I want to hear your thoughts here in response to Scott Galloway.
Well, I used to cover responsible gambling within the gambling industry, so I don't have a lot of pushback against Scott Galloway here. I mean, I think, and I've covered the lawsuits that state gaming commissions have brought against Kalshi and Robinhood and friends, and what the tribes have brought against Kalshi and the prediction market companies. And I think the most dangerous thing for the prediction market industry is going to be themselves. And it's going to be this issue. I mean, a failure to properly educate the young men who gravitate toward these platforms, who are developing gambling disorders on these platforms, even if they're not clinically recognized as so. That's a huge danger for the industry, and that is happening. I was talking to Ilya Balin. He's this great professor who wrote this great history of derivatives, just published, I think earlier this year. I think in January. And you know, he's a financial law expert. He's building a case against event contracts from the point of view of financial law. And he's saying, look, as we've gotten more speculative and as we've increased access to derivatives, you know, we've moved from traditional derivatives where you're posting variation margin to event contracts where, you know, it's this all or nothing bet. And yes, the platforms are increasingly paying interest. And so it's not quite as binary as it looks, but it's not going to make up for catastrophic losses like that. So in short, yeah, it's going to be this enormous problem. And it's not actually a new one. There's a researcher in California named Timothy Fong who he's been researching trading addiction well before the rise of prediction markets. And it's a tricky issue for gambling counselors who are counseling problem gamblers to get things under control. And when you're doing cognitive behavioral therapy with those patients, if they're doing it on a gambling app, you may be working on standard fallacies like don't chase losses and this isn't really worth it and you can't really win it back. But if it's in finance, if the gambling is dressed in finance, that's harder to break through, because you're not gambling, you're investing, and that window dressing is enough to create new challenges for gambling counselor providers as well. They're not impossible to overcome. There's great research and work in tweaking therapies to make sure that you can break through to those patients and help them recover. But no, responsible gambling is going to become an enormous fault line in the industry. And if the platforms aren't proactive about it, they're hanging a big anvil around their necks.
Yeah, I am curious about the education aspect here because if nothing else, like there should be some educational resources out there that companies are like providing to users. And I'm sure they do at some level. I'm sure it's not enough, but I'm also skeptical of that. And I'm curious if you have any thoughts about any that has been successful. Cause I'm thinking about like the DARE program when we were kids. Right. Mm-hmm. And then it turns out like DARE for drug addiction, it turns out that like it was counterproductive. And I think that can be, maybe even the same here because, you're learning, let's just say things like, you're more than likely going to lose your money. If you're young and you're a young man and like, you're like raging with testosterone, your like main thing that you're thinking is like, yeah, but I'm not one of those suckers. Right. Yeah. Like that's not me. Like the fact that they all lost their money, that makes it more likely that I'm gonna like your brain is thinking these weird, like dumb, immature ways. I don't know, but like, do you have any thoughts on any educational tactics that have been successful here? Or
I know the National Council on Problem Gambling has sponsored a few high school education programs. So they take you through some of those topics that you just raised. The odds are stacked against you, how the house is stacked against you, to basically preempt some of the later arguments. You'll argue to yourself, should you develop a gambling problem? So if you're reaching out to high schoolers and even middle schoolers about gambling and the reality behind those numbers, even if it's dressed in finance, those are some early intervention programs and prevention programs that have done quite well in keeping people from developing severe problems. And to their credit, platforms like Kalshi, they do have deposit limits and time limits. They've adopted a lot of the standard protections that sportsbooks offer. They're at a larger scale, and they're probably going to have to go further than the sportsbooks, because the sportsbooks will spend, whatever they need to on responsible gambling as dictated by their state regulators or by state lawmakers. Since Kalshi is only accountable to the CFTC and they're available in all 50 states, and the same is going to be true of Polymarket quite soon, they're going to have to take a lead in some responsible trading programs as well to make sure that they're protecting their traders as well as they can.
What about regulation? It seems like to me the Trump administration has no interest in that. I mean, and yeah, I mean, just like it's just obvious, and they're like living it up on a lot of just like
Trump
easy
finally
money
has
from
a
this
successful casino.
Yeah. There you go. Exactly. But kind of like, let's just say in the next 5 or 10 years, a couple election cycles happen, and we have more time to think about this. What are some smart regulations that you would put in place, or that you maybe think that we should look into more?
There are things I would look into. Still agnostic about whether some of these would have all the intended effect that we want. Some of them are market integrity things. So I'm curious to see how mention markets are going to survive in a new administration that's interested in placing guardrails. Even if Brian Armstrong is not profiting off of saying whatever words he's going to say in the mention markets, that's an easily manipulatable market. That's not just being settled by reality. That can be settled by somebody who can control the outcome of the event. That's really the standard for market manipulation in derivatives and event contracts in particular. So I think you'll see some markets like that either get heavily limited or delisted altogether. I don't think it'd be unreasonable to see a future CFTC commissioner saying, "Hey, let's trim some of these different markets." I think those are going to be the big two. I think it's going to be trimming out some of the more, kind of quote unquote fun markets. And I think you'll see some of the integrity protections around events. So, the MLB announced that its sportsbook partners are going to put, I think, $200 limits on player props in the wake of a couple of scandals that have come out of the NBA and Major League Baseball. So, that should limit the monetary incentive for adjusting your own player performance to win a bet or help other people win bets. But those are the two paths I think we're going to see. I think we're going to see limits on some of those event contracts on events that other people can directly control. And I think you will see delisting of certain contracts in a future administration.
So you brought up the NBA scandal. I wanted to talk about that a little bit. So this was a couple of weeks ago. Kash Patel, did a huge news conference, and it was covered by everybody. It was a big story. I think it was a little bit overblown to some degree, because it was oh, this is a huge scandal in the NBA, and then there was one guy, and then there was and his friends, and then there was an NBA coach in Portland, but he wasn't even using prediction markets. He was in Vegas doing some other completely. It's a slightly bit overblown, but in any case, it is a thing. I read something interesting. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. Well, it was split between poker and sports betting. So there was a sports betting piece of it, and there was a larger, the coach getting involved with, sharking people out of, high stakes poker games. And this is something that, and this is something that the sports betting industry has brought up. Hey, we're the ones who reported it, and we saw the weird trades and the weird behavior, and we caught it. So why are you mad at us?
Yeah, 100%. No, 100%. That's exactly right. And also, I mean, this does, bring up just another harm to society, where it's not just necessarily individual people who are being harmed by this because they're gambling addictions or just dumb bets. There also could be potentially, I saw some people writing about this, and it's overblown, but there's something here that if this were just to go unchecked, fans would completely lose faith in the game. If they're oh, the natural winner isn't going to win the NBA finals this year, it's going to be because of somebody's shitty sports bet. If we just knew that, or even doubted that, interest in sports would go way down, right? For the average fan. So it could potentially have devastating consequences for these huge industries of sport. And that's why they have an incentive to never let that happen. But at the same time, I don't know, do you worry about anything like that, where it's the public loses confidence in the integrity of various sports?
Not not a whole scale collapse of faith in the integrity of games. The leagues have been really quick to react to even minor indiscretions. I don't remember who it was. There was a professional player who gambled on a sports book, but it was on a game that he wasn't in and it wasn't on his team, and he still got thrown out, and that was controversial. I can go find it later if you really, really want to. But now the leagues are very sensitive about this. The sports books are sensitive about this, and the prediction markets, they don't want that negative press either. They don't want to be the source of that problem, and I don't think they are. I think they may, and if the worst case scenario is they end up adjusting their player props a little bit, that's not a big change. And if the league is sufficiently sharp about cracking down on integrity issues, I don't think you're going to see the whole scale collapse of faith and integrity in sports from fans. I think the leagues will manage that just fine, even if there are continuing scandals that appear. Now, if there's a repeat of a certain type of scandal on a certain platform, that's very different. We're not talking about a one-time crisis anymore. We're talking about negligence. That could change something, but I need to see more of the same story a couple of times before I start worrying about the whole-scale collapse of faith in sports.
Right. Yeah. There's almost a level where this almost makes right now, right? This makes sports kind of more fun and more interesting because there's like intrigue and people love intrigue.
Yeah. We can
As
get
it stands now.
Yeah. Any crisis is recoverable once managed properly. But again, it's, do you make a mistake, or have you revealed a blind spot, or are you continually negligent over a number of games, a number of crises? Is there a systemic problem that remains unresolved? That's something I'm going to be watching, in 2026 and 2027. And we're still early enough that I have the luxury of that answer. But again, we're going to see how these future seasons play out.
I mean, that actually leads me right into my last question here, which is, what should we look out for in 2026 with the midterm elections and then the presidential election after that, for someone who just follows this, with vague interest and is interested in how these markets, predict the future at some level? What are some markers that you would recommend people pay attention to?
I'm going to bring you inside baseball because that's all I can do with these early markets. So if you go look at the midterms markets on Kalshi, for example, some of those races on this House district in Arizona or a certain House district in Texas that's not getting a lot of attention. Some of those markets, still in November 2025, a year out from the elections, are 5, 10, 15,000 in trade volume. There's not a lot of activity yet. It's not a huge story right now. We're still going through candidate selection. The earliest states with filing deadlines don't, have a filing cutoff until February, and some of them go as late as August. So you're going to have these long, drawn-out primaries. And one of the things you can watch is to see, how these low-volume markets are going to change as we get clarity about who's running within each party, what the matchups are going to look like. And I'm going to be curious to see when trade volume really begins to increase in some of these markets. Once we have candidate selection done in states that are finished in February, do those markets begin to get more attention, or do we have to wait until, we're at a fever pitch, midterms mood in late summer, early fall next year? But what you want to see are prices that are reacting to news, not just to large trades.
Right. Yeah. Like Katie Porter. Did you follow the Katie Porter thing?
Oh,
where she had her little moment on the news.
That was odd.
It was incredible. Yeah, her personality kind of just revealed itself, and that alone moved the prediction markets in a second, which was fascinating.
Yeah, but it was a large volume, popular market, so you knew that it was reacting to the news and not just to one or two traders who suddenly had a change of heart and thought, oh, she's worth, I got to sell. I got to sell off at 40 or 50 cents wherever she was at. And, there are people who are only buying her for 20 something now. I think she was low 20s when I checked late last week. So.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah. I'm going to be following that. Living in California. Yeah. I'm curious about that market.
Yeah. Okay. I'm ready to see these markets start to respond to, the markets instead of trades.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's all very fascinating, very educational. Chris, loved having you on the show today. Tell the people where to follow you, where to read your work, etc.
Sure. You can follow us on, you can follow me on X at GerlacherC. You can follow us at Prediction News if you want to see our news site and watch us cover the industry. We're covering the political markets, major market moves, the lawsuits, of course, just really getting a good picture of what the prediction market industry is doing right now and where it's probably going to go. And frankly, the future looks very bright for it. So, enjoy the ride with us.
Great. Hey, well, thanks again. That's a lot of fun.